everybody. My name is Bradley Shaw, and thank you for joining us in Between the Covers. Tonight I'm talking to Ken Dunlop, author of his own memoir, Dazzler Dunlop, my inside story. What is it? Inside my squared circle.
Inside my squared circle.
Yeah. Hello, Ken. How are you?
Good, thank you.
It's a wonderful book, and thank you for allowing us to help you with this journey. But also, please introduce yourself and tell us the viewers a little bit about this wonderful story of yours.
Okay, my name is Ken Dunlop. My wrestling name was Dazzler Dunlop. I started training to wrestle in 1977 when wrestling in Australia was very big at the time, because there was World Championship Wrestling on TV twice a week. So it was very big. I started learning at the end of that sort of trail, and I had got to train with 5 wrestlers who were all on TV at the time, and they were all the bad guys, and they knew a lot more than the good guys. And it was just, a lot of fun. I grew up watching wrestling as a young child, and Mum and I went to Festival Hall every Saturday night, and I just fell in love with professional wrestling. And from the age of 7, if you asked me what I wanted to be, it was either a policeman or a wrestler.
Okay.
So it was a fascinating choice.
So why did wrestling win over police? What was the choice? You didn't want to have a gun? You didn't want to have to...
No, I actually did try to apply for the police force, but I was 1 inch too short. Because back in those days, there was a height limit in those days.
Yeah.
So I passed all the other... I had the physical, I had the mental exam, I had all those sort of things done right.
Yeah.
And, I was 1 inch too short. So they said, come back in a year or two. And I thought, well, I'm not going to grow.
That's right. Stretch yourself out. So, that 1 inch would have helped a lot, being a bit shorter in the ring for the wrestling, though, wouldn't it? Made you a little more slippery.
I might have been a little bit bigger for the wrestling, but my size was great. I was considered at first a light heavyweight, they called us in those days, or junior heavyweight. And as I got older, of course, I got heavier and heavier and heavier. Then I became a heavyweight.
Yeah. So back then too, wrestling was so new. It was more a club thing. It wasn't actually a commercial thing. You mentioned earlier that some of the wrestlers had got onto TV. So that was really, for you said it in such a way that it must have been such almost a distinguishable element of the wrestling. So it's still a bit more underground or a bit more unknown in a sort of smaller circles. It didn't really become a big
No, it was very big in Australia from 1964 to 1978. They did Melbourne Festival Hall every Saturday night, and they nearly filled 6,000 people every week.
Awesome.
So they did all around Australia. Then they did all the country areas. But when it died on TV in 78 for World Series cricket, it sort of killed Melbourne basically, and there was only 1 or 2 shows a month. Yeah. Sydney had the club scene, so Sydney had a lot more work. That's why I moved to Sydney in the end of 79.
Yeah. No, I knew about it through Sydney. I didn't know it was as big in Melbourne during the 60s, as you said. I came across it in the 80s in New South Wales and Sydney, but that's amazing. Well done. So from starting point though, you almost, I guess, we're at the starting point of the industry. It was still relatively young here, as you say, in Australia. So you were at the start of it and became part of that culture very quickly. Yeah,
so I was 16 when I started learning, and had my first match at 17, and my last match just before my 40th birthday. Wow. So I was around for a long time. It was interesting because at the same time of learning to wrestle, that's when I was coming to terms with my sexuality as well.
Yeah.
And in those days, it wasn't talked about. I was 16, 17, so I was sort of learning the wrestling from some very tough, macho, old-fashioned, tough guys.
Yeah.
And so I had to sort of keep it to myself, but I was also dealing with the issues myself. So at times I sort of got very depressed, especially in my earlier days.
Yeah.
I sort of felt really comfortable. I told a few guys at the time, and they were quite fine with it.
Yeah.
I didn't blurt it out to everybody, but if anyone asked me, I'd always be honest and tell them.
Yeah.
But I didn't come out to my family till I was about 20 or 21.
Okay. And how'd they react to that?
Oh, fantastic. Mum said she knew all the time anyway.
You can't put it past Mum.
Yeah. Dad was a bit shocked at first. He didn't speak to me for 2 days afterwards. He just walked out of the room, didn't say nothing.
No.
And then he just sort of said, look, you're my son, I love you, just don't talk about it.
Fair enough.
So
yeah.
we pretty much didn't talk about it until 20 years later, type of thing, when my mother got ill and then my mother passed away.
Yeah.
Dad and I became really close, and then it was just nothing. Then he didn't care, and it was great.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay. Well, you're lucky. Like, you had a really good, strong family support in that sense. It was still, it had to adapt to it, but I understand, because the culture and the time period was different. The view of things were different sometimes. But yeah, no, I'm glad they came to your aid and helped with that. So
yeah, and my brother and sister were all very helpful at the time as well. They were all very supportive.
So when you came out in the public sense, in the wrestling ring as well, was that a part of it as well, coming out in your 20s, or did you keep that still secret to that degree until?
I didn't keep it a secret. I didn't blurt it out, but I was quite camp in the ring. I had a lot of wonderful outfits. I had some beautiful capes. I spent a lot of money on my outfits, and I'd get in the ring and do a little bit of a twirl with my pink gown and my red and black gown.
Yeah.
And so I was quite camp a little bit.
But that's the thing with that sort of thing. Yeah, it was a show. So you had a little bit of campness you could get away with in that sense without, being over the top. And as you say, really profiling the whole, the exploitation of it. But you could use that and be comfortable in that arena. And I'm curious what you said here. Inside my squared circle, the subtitle of your book. Tell me what was your reference to that?
A lot of wrestlers call the wrestling ring a squared circle. So that's where the squared circle came from.
Right.
And just like me on the inside of it, like looking out type of thing. That's where it came from. That was my very first option, and then I wrote down 4 or 5 more, but that was the first option, and that's what I stuck with.
Yeah. So what made you sit down and to put this book together? Why did you say to yourself, I really want to write this book about the story? You had the acceptance of the family, you had the success of the wrestling, society and community that you had been a part of, and yet something propelled you. What was it that made you want to write this book?
When I sit down with other folks from the wrestling, we all sit around and tell stories. And all the time they used to say, you should write a book, because I told so many stories just off the top of my head. And they'd say some little thing and it would trigger a memory. So I'd tell them another story. So when I retired from work 4 years ago, mainly due to ill health at the time, but my health has picked up a lot since then, thank God.
Yeah.
Just sort of played with the idea at first. Then I sort of thought, I'll just try and write it down on paper beforehand to see if I can get a book.
Yeah.
And so I sort of did that for about 6 months. And then I sort of let it go for about 2 months, just totally forgot about it. And then I went back and I just kept remembering things. So I've got notepads next to my coffee table, next to my bed, next to my kitchen table, and next to the computer. And I'd remember things, I'd just go and write them all down, and then I'd start doing. And even in the end, when I thought I'd finished the book, we actually added 9 more chapters. So so it's incredible.
Yeah. So was it difficult to write? Was it difficult to remember and go back into some of those periods and be accurate and make sure that you were true to yourself as well? Because memories can be funny things too.
Yeah. Luckily enough, I wrote down every match I had in a little book. So I had that as a good reference. Good. And I've got 2 or 3 friends, Ed Locke, who wrote the foreword for the book. Yeah. He's a wrestling historian, and his memory is just cast iron.
Yeah, good.
So I had 2 or 3 meetings with him, and he gave me dates. And there was a local wrestling magazine at the time, or there was 2 actually, and he had a lot of those copies of those. So he gave me copies to read so I can brush up. So I had all the dates right, and so I was pretty followed through as much as I could.
And this was your first book that you've actually written, unless you've sat down studiously written, or you've written before?
Yeah. Well, I've always worked pretty hard. I've always worked 2 or 3 jobs and had long hours.
Yep.
And I didn't have time, basically, before to do it. And I had thought about it 2 or 3 years earlier, but I just didn't have time, because I was doing like 60 hours a week of work. Yeah. And 6 days a week. So I just didn't have time to do it. Once I finished, I thought, well, I'm going to travel. That's what I love doing, traveling. So I travel 3 times a year.
Yeah.
And yeah, then I had the time. So and when I started doing it, it was amazing. I was getting up at like 6 o'clock in the morning. I'd sit down for 3 or 4 hours every day and do it. And then sometimes you'd get stale, so I'd just stop for the day or stop for 2 or 3 days. Yeah. Then I'd come back to it, and then I'd just, as I said, keep remembering things. So I'd have to go back and add it and change it. And
yeah. Oh, amazing.
There was a few personal things I didn't put in the first draft.
Mm-hmm.
And sitting there talking to Joey, and I've got 2 really good friends who have known me for 40 years, and they sort of said, you should really put that in, because you're only telling your story once.
Yeah,
you should really put that in. Yeah. Even though it's very deeply personal stuff, it was very painful to bring back some of those memories. And
it is. I mean, a memoir by definition is a brave document for any man or woman to write. I mean, it is very personal usually, and if you're brave enough to put those things in it too, it makes it so much more valuable to a reader. They understand that it is your personal story. But again, your colleagues who, I mean, I'm assuming they eventually all understood and found out and everything who you were. Will there be anything in there that you feel some will be surprised by, or things and the other stories or the experiences you've had through that time, their perspectives will be changed or different?
There will be a lot of raised eyes with them, because they didn't know to the extent of my gay life. They knew I was gay, but I never obviously flaunted it. Yeah. But I think the field will be quite shocked by that. And some of the things about depression, which I always hid very well, they didn't know about that. So few will be raised about that.
Okay. And what about those that know you, know you well? Will they learn more about you as well? Will there be things in there that you share that even to your closest people maybe they still don't know?
The closest people know. The 2 friends I've got who I've known for 40 years, they know all about my gay life. Yeah. They actually didn't know much about my wrestling life.
Okay.
I mean, they did come to a couple of wrestling shows, but they weren't really into it. So they will learn a lot about that side of my life, and
Good. So did you find that you wanted to talk with other wrestlers as well from the time and get their input to the book? And did you use them as well, help them to create the wrestling memories?
I spoke to about 6 or 7 of the guys, and I told them what I was basically doing, and they sort of all positive. They were all really helpful and suggested things. There's another guy who wasn't a wrestler, but he's very heavily involved in wrestling podcasts and wrestling, writing stories on wrestling. Yep. And he helped me tremendously as well. He sat down with me 2 or 3 times as well. And one time, him and Ed Locke came to my house and they interviewed me for 3 hours. Wow. And they taped it. And they went home and they'd read my script or the book as it was at the time. Yeah. And then they went back and listened to it and said, well, this is not in there, this is not in there, this is not in there. So they gave me a whole, I think it was about 13 or 14 pages of A4 pages of things I didn't put in the book. So so just talking about things, I still remember things. And I even said to Joey the other day, I told him a story and he said, that's not in the book.
That's what I'm saying.
It's too late now.
there's so many pieces of your life that we are, even until you start consciously thinking about your past, you can just, it can be blurred, there's things in there. But as you say, once you've triggered a process, a thought, you can really see so much more of yourself in your life. And then to sit and write that down is a very big accomplishment. It's very, not only brave, but very, thoughtful and articulate to do that. Well done. You've done a great job.
That's why it took so long to do it. It took me 18 months. I wanted to do it right. I didn't want to just rush it. So that's why I thank you for your patience with me as well.
No, it's been a pleasure. And in fact, in some degrees, as horrible and frustrating as COVID has been for many people, in some elements, it has made us slow down, made us stop, and made us be able to use our time a little more effectively, with our family and friends and things we can do as well that we don't get time to do usually because we're all so busy rushing. So, that helps as well. So what do you hope our reader, like the viewers watching, what do you hope when they buy your book? What are they going to get out of it for them? Like as a person who doesn't understand wrestling or doesn't understand being gay, what do you want to share? What is this story really about for you?
I'd like people to know the history of Australian professional wrestling because, as I said, it was very, very big at one time. It's still, from the 80s, 90s when I was around, it sort of was still very regular and very good work. It died off a little bit in the early 2000s, but it's been coming back again now. Yep. So people just don't know about wrestling. They don't consider wrestling a sport, and it is a sport. Yeah. I mean, it's a theatrical sport. Yep. Plus, dealing with sexuality and being involved in such a macho world. Yeah. I mean, nowadays, lucky enough, being gay doesn't matter in wrestling. Even in Australia now, there's probably about 7 or 8 openly gay wrestlers, and it's not an issue. But again, back in my time, it wasn't talked about. It was ignored, and people don't realise that it was even illegal till. I think 82 it was illegal, so I wasn't aware of that until later on.
In the 70s, if you did public displays,
so I mean, I could have been arrested many occasions. So when you look at it that way, and then of course the AIDS crisis, when the AIDS crisis came, that was a really scary area. Because with the wrestling, you get cut quite often.
That's right.
I mean, there are ways of doing it yourself, intentional.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, you do get your busted eyes and your busted lips and noses.
Yeah.
And when the AIDS crisis hit, like, you had to stop and think, and then I had to tell more people then that I was gay. If I was wrestling people, they weren't aware. If I was going to bleed, or I said, look, I'm gay. If there's an issue with you, I had regular tests and everything done. But so they're extra things you don't have to think, or you don't normally think about. So
no. Was it hard to as you say, like, deal with the public persona of being Dazzler Dunlop, but in the private, being depressed and being alone because you didn't have that ability to share and want to be yourself? What was that like for you as well? It must have been hard.
It was hard, but I've always had some good friends around me who I've known for a long time, and my family have always, again, been very supportive. So there's a lot of people who don't have that support and they suffer. There's a couple of young wrestlers, unfortunately, have suicided.
That's right.
And they had no support and they couldn't talk to their family. And I always made my house an open door for all guys, because I taught a lot of young guys to wrestle as well.
Yeah.
And my house was an open house. They can all come 24/7, 7 days a week if they had problems. Yeah. And I had a lot of the guys come from broken homes, and so they would come on the weekends. And in the end, I had a 1-bedroom unit for many years. I ended up getting a 4-bedroom house.
I was going to say, that wouldn't accommodate many people, but the open door, no.
I had a fold-out bed, and I had a stretcher bed. So quite often I'd have 2 or 3 people stay at the weekend, and that was just my life. I accepted them, and I helped as many as I could over the years. And so I got the bigger house, and some of the kids moved in, and I taught them the value of life. I taught them about the value of money.
Yep.
Just taught them respect, because a lot of them didn't have respect because they come from broken homes.
Yeah.
And they've all turned out to be really wonderful people, and I'm still friends with 90% of them.
Well done, Ken. Well done. So tell me, how do you feel having done this achievement? I mean, you've achieved a lot in your life. You've got a very high integrity. You've got a discipline of sport, but writing this book and publicly and setting out for the publishing journey and setting up to tell this to the world, how are you feeling right now in yourself?
I feel really good about it. I feel proud that I've done it. I'm a little bit nervous when it comes out on some of the reactions that I'm going to get. Again, because I'm very honest. I speak the truth. I've always been known for that, which doesn't sit well with some people. There's a couple of people in the book I've roasted, and they deserved it. And I doubt they'll read it, but I'm sure they'll hear about it. So I might get a few emails or SMS saying, what the hell is this? But that's the truth. I mean, I can only tell the truth.
Well, let's focus on the positives and hope that you get a standing ovation and, you know, people rush out to buy it and enjoy it. And I think in particular that period, and also, you know, those that have dealt with their sexuality or challenged with their sexuality, young and older or whatever, and also understand that, you know, like living a life during periods of this Australian history. And this is one of the things you said earlier, which is amazing. It's a small piece of trivia, but it's an amazing fact that no autobiography has been written about a wrestler in Australia, and you're the first. So this is the first book, a biography of a wrestler in Australian history, in Australian sport. That's amazing.
There's only been 2 books on wrestling in Australia. One was a 100-year history of Australian wrestling, and one was based on the World Championship era from 64 to 78.
Wow.
So
were you in both of those?
No.
Oh, what a jip. Jeez. Oh, it's only 2 books, but anyway, you had to write your own. It's all good. So no,
I'm too young.
No, Ken, you've done a great job, and everybody watching, the book is out in November. It's a wonderful story. It's a real story, and I want to ask everybody watching to please go and grab a copy of this book at the bookstop and or online. And also, we really do encourage you to go to the bookshop, because going to your bookshop is important to keep those businesses going. So books like this can keep going in the market. So please support Ken, support a hungry author, and buy the book and just indulge your story and enjoy it. It's wonderful. So Ken, thank you so much for spending your time with us this evening.
A pleasure.
Yeah, and thank you everybody for watching, and please watch out for Ken. I think you'll be seeing him around the talk show area and on the radio. So he's quite a personality and he's quite a talent. So thank you, and good night everybody. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Good night.